Cô hãy cầm số tiền này mà trả nợ.
Tôi cảm ơn anh. I can't thank you enough. This means everything to me.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today's story is an emotional journey about Tieu Lac, a young girl trapped under a crushing debt of 500 million VND caused by her adoptive parents. Forced to work endlessly and pushed to the edge of despair, she nearly lost her freedom when cruel debt collectors threatened to sell her to settle the debt. Just when her life seemed hopeless, a young CEO stepped in at the most critical moment. With one decisive action, he paid off the entire debt, protected Tieu Lac, and gave her a chance to reclaim her dignity and future. From darkness and fear, Tieu Lac found light, hope, and the courage to start a new life. If you were touched by this story of kindness, courage, and second chances, please like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel for more emotional CEO dramas and inspiring stories. Your support means everything to us. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Tieu Lac's life had long been trapped in a cycle of exhaustion, fear, and silent despair. From the moment she woke up until her body could no longer stand, she worked endlessly, pushing herself beyond her limits just to survive. The crushing debt of 500 million VND, borrowed by her adoptive parents from dangerous people, hung over her like a dark cloud that never disappeared. It was not just a number, it was a chain that bound her youth, her freedom, and her future. Every day, Tieu Lac reminded herself that if she worked harder, if she endured a little more pain, maybe one day the debt would finally be paid off. But deep down, she knew the truth. No matter how hard she tried, the amount she earned was never enough. Her days began before sunrise. She took on multiple jobs, cleaning, carrying heavy goods, working long shifts without rest, anything that could bring in a little extra money. Her hands were rough, her back constantly aching, and her eyes always heavy with fatigue. While others her age dreamed of love, careers, and happiness, Tieu Lac's only concern was how to earn enough money to hand over to the debt collectors. She rarely complained, even when her body trembled from exhaustion. She believed that enduring suffering was her responsibility because it was her adoptive parents who had raised her, fed her, and given her a place to stay when she had nowhere else to go. However, the debt was not an ordinary one. The people her adoptive parents owed money to were ruthless and heartless. They showed up regularly, banging on the door, shouting threats, and demanding repayment with cruel impatience. Each visit filled the small house with fear. Tieu Lac could feel her heart racing every time she heard unfamiliar footsteps outside. She watched her adoptive parents grow thinner, more anxious, their eyes filled with panic and guilt. They had never imagined the debt would spiral out of control like this, and now they were trapped, too afraid to resist, too desperate to escape. As time passed, the pressure grew unbearable. The debt collectors no longer wanted to wait. They began making horrifying suggestions, coldly proposing that Tieu Lac herself could be used to settle the debt. At first, she thought she had misheard. The words sounded unreal, like a nightmare spoken out loud, but the looks in their eyes were serious, calculating, and cruel. They spoke of her as if she were nothing more than an object, something that could be traded to erase numbers on paper. In that moment, Tieu Lac felt her world collapse. What hurt her the most was not only the threat itself, but the silence of her adoptive parents. They were terrified, trembling, unable to defend her. She saw the conflict in their eyes, the love they felt for her fighting against the fear of the violent men standing before them. Over time, their resistance weakened. Desperation slowly replaced reason. Tiolak realized, with a pain deeper than any physical exhaustion, that she was becoming the last bargaining chip in a debt she never created. Despite everything, Tiolak did not run away. She stayed. She continued to work harder than ever, hoping to delay the inevitable. She told herself that as long as she kept earning money, as long as she kept enduring, she might protect herself and her adoptive parents. But late at night, when she was alone, the fear overwhelmed her. She cried silently, clutching her worn clothes, wondering why her life had become such a cruel test. She felt powerless, trapped between loyalty and survival, love and sacrifice. At her lowest point, Tiolak truly believed that her life no longer belonged to her. She was exhausted, frightened, and slowly losing hope. The world around her felt dark and unforgiving, and she could not see a way out. She never imagined that anyone would step in to help her, let alone change her fate. In her mind, miracles did not exist for people like her. And yet, it was precisely at this moment of complete despair that her destiny was about to change, though she had no way of knowing it yet. The day everything changed began like any other, heavy, tense, and filled with fear. Tiolak had just returned home after another exhausting shift, when the sound of aggressive knocking shattered the silence of the small house. She knew that sound all too well. The debt collectors were back. Her heart sank as panic rushed through her veins. Before she could react, the door was forced open, and the familiar figures stepped inside, their expressions cold and impatient. They no longer bothered with threats wrapped in polite words. This time, they wanted a final answer. The men made it clear that they were done waiting. The money had not been repaid, and their patience had run out. They repeated their cruel proposal that Tiolak herself would be taken to settle the debt. Her adoptive parents stood frozen, their faces pale, hands trembling, unable to speak. Tiolak felt her legs weaken, yet she forced herself to stand in front of them. She knew that running or begging would change nothing. In that moment, she prepared herself for the worst, believing that this was the price she would have to pay to protect the people who had raised her. Just as the situation was about to spiral completely out of control, a calm but authoritative voice cut through the tension. None of them had noticed the man standing outside until he stepped forward. He was young, well-dressed, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that immediately shifted the atmosphere in the room. This was the young CEO. He had been searching for Tiolak after learning fragments of her situation, but he had never expected to walk into such a terrifying scene. The debt collectors turned their attention to him, clearly irritated by the interruption. They demanded to know who he was and why he was interfering. The CEO did not raise his voice. He did not show anger or fear. Instead, he calmly asked one simple question: "How much is the debt?" The men laughed, assuming he was just another naive outsider. When they mentioned the amount, 500 million VND, they expected hesitation. What they did not expect was his immediate response. "I'll pay it," the CEO said, his tone steady and firm. The room fell silent. Tiolak thought she had misheard. Her adoptive parents stared at him in disbelief, their mouths slightly open. The debt collectors hesitated, trying to assess whether this man was serious or bluffing. Without another word, the CEO pulled out his phone and made a call. He instructed his assistant to transfer the full amount immediately. There was no negotiation, no delay, no conditions, just a clear decision. When the confirmation of the transfer arrived, the debt collectors' expressions changed. The power they had held for so long slipped away in an instant. The CEO warned them, calmly but coldly, that if they ever returned or threatened the family again, legal consequences would follow. His words were not loud, but they carried undeniable authority. Realizing they had lost, the men took the money and left, their dominance reduced to silence. Only after the door closed did the reality sink in. Tieu Lac's body trembled as the tension finally released. Tears streamed down her face as she struggled to process what had just happened. The weight that had crushed her for so long, fear, exhaustion, humiliation, was suddenly gone. She looked at the CEO, unable to find words. Her adoptive parents broke down, overwhelmed by relief and guilt, repeatedly bowing and thanking him. The CEO turned to Tieu Lac, his gaze gentle yet serious. He told her that she was not an object, not a tool to pay off anyone's mistakes. He reminded her that no one had the right to decide her fate except herself. His words struck her deeper than the act of paying the debt itself. For the first time in a long while, someone had stood between her and the darkness, not out of obligation, but out of choice. That day did not just mark the end of a debt, it marked the moment Tieu Lac's life was pulled back from the edge. And though she did not yet fully understand what this man would mean to her future, she knew one thing for certain. The nightmare that had haunted her for so long was finally over. After the debt was paid and the threat finally disappeared, Tieu Lac's life slowly began to change in ways she had never imagined possible. The silence in the house no longer felt heavy with fear. There were no more sudden knocks on the door, no more sleepless nights filled with panic. For the first time in years, Tieu Lac woke up without her heart racing, without the immediate dread of what the day might bring. The burden that had crushed her spirit for so long was finally gone, and in its place came an unfamiliar but gentle feeling: relief. She no longer had to work herself to exhaustion just to survive. The endless cycle of multiple jobs, aching muscles, and silent tears came to an end. Tieu Lac finally had time to rest, to breathe, and to listen to her own thoughts. At first, the calm felt strange, almost frightening. She had lived in survival mode for so long that peace felt unreal. But slowly, she began to understand that she was free. Free from debt, free from fear, and free from the belief that her life was only worth the money she could earn. Her adoptive parents were deeply affected by what had happened. Guilt weighed heavily on them as they realized how close they had come to losing her. They apologized again and again, their voices filled with regret and shame. Tieu Lac did not blame them. She understood their fear and weakness, and she chose forgiveness over resentment. What mattered most to her was that the nightmare had ended, and they could finally live without being controlled by debt and threats. Yet above all, Tieu Lac's heart was filled with gratitude toward the young CEO. His action had not only saved her, it had restored her dignity. She struggled to find words strong enough to express what she felt. Every time she thought of that moment when he stood between her and the debt collectors, her eyes filled with tears. He had changed her fate with a single decision without expecting anything in return. When she finally gathered the courage to thank him properly, she bowed deeply, her voice trembling as she expressed her gratitude. She promised that she would never forget what he had done for her. The CEO listened quietly. He told her that she did not owe him her life or her freedom. What he wanted was for her to live well, to believe in herself, and to choose a future that belonged to her. His words were gentle, but they carried a strength that stayed with her. With his encouragement, Tieu Lac began to rebuild her life. She started planning for the future instead of merely surviving the present. She learned new skills, considered returning to school, and dared to dream again. Each small step forward felt like a victory. She was no longer the exhausted girl trapped by debt. She was someone with choices and hope. As time passed, a quiet bond formed between Tieu Lac and the CEO. It was not built on obligation or gratitude alone, but on mutual respect and understanding. He admired her resilience, her kindness, and her ability to endure unimaginable hardship without losing her humanity. She, in turn, saw beyond his wealth and status, recognizing the compassion and responsibility that guided his actions. Tieu Lac knew that her life had been divided into two parts, before and after the day he paid the debt. Before, she lived in darkness and fear. After, she stepped into light and possibility. She carried her gratitude not as a burden, but as a motivation to become stronger, kinder, and more independent. Looking ahead, Tiolak did not know exactly what the future held, but for the first time, she was no longer afraid of it. She believed that no matter what challenges awaited her, she would face them with courage. And deep in her heart, she knew that the kindness she had received would continue to guide her forward, reminding her that even in the darkest moments, someone might step in and change everything.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tiểu Lạc Review. Vậy là câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kết thúc tại đây. Trong câu chuyện của chúng ta ngày hôm nay đã kể về nội dung đó chính là việc vị CEO đã cứu Tiểu Lạc, và vị CEO này đã cho Tiểu Lạc một số tiền đó chính là 500 triệu đồng, một số tiền rất lớn mà cả đời này Tiểu Lạc chưa bao giờ nghĩ tới. Và số tiền này sẽ dùng để cô trả mẹ nuôi của cô, để đổi lấy sự tự do của cô. Cô sẽ không bị mẹ nuôi của cô đem đi gán nợ cho chồng cũ của cô nữa, và cô có thể tự do quyết định cuộc sống của mình mà không còn phải phụ thuộc vào mẹ nuôi của mình nữa. Tiểu Lạc cảm thấy rất là cảm động trước sự chân thành cũng như lòng tốt của vị CEO này. Mặc dù vị CEO không yêu cầu cô bao giờ phải trả lại số tiền lớn đó, nhưng Tiểu Lạc đã hứa là sẽ cố gắng tìm mọi cách, cách sớm nhất có thể kiếm số tiền lớn đó và hoàn trả lại vị CEO. Cô cảm ơn vị CEO rất nhiều. Mọi tình tiết hấp dẫn về câu chuyện của Tiểu Lạc và vị CEO sẽ còn được kể ở các video tiếp theo. Các bạn đừng quên bấm vào nút subscribe để đăng ký kênh, sẽ nhận được thông báo mới nhất về các câu chuyện sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Lý Tiểu Lạc Review nha. Và các bạn cũng đừng quên bấm like, share và để bình luận góp ý ở dưới video. Mọi bình luận góp ý của các bạn sẽ giúp mình cải thiện các nội dung, các câu chuyện tiếp theo trên kênh của mình hay hơn nữa để phục vụ các khán giả. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Thanks for watching my video. Please continue support my channel and subscribe my channel everyone. Bye bye everyone. See you soon.